Are blue blood programs actually good for the sport? It seems like the people that advocate for these programs are elitist. Well, I feel attacked. And they do not like when a new team is on the rise, aka Clemson before they won it all. He's checking in from San Antonio, Texas. Am I an elitist? I don't dress like one. But maybe that's just the disguise. Because I root for these teams. Maybe it's because they do better traffic for us. But I don't want to sound so self-centered as to think that that's the only motivation we have around here. I'll tell you, that's a joke, because here's where I seriously am. I'll tell you why I like blue blood programs. Because they exhibit the characteristics I believe in college football. This is not a parity-driven sport. This will always be a top-heavy sport. However, I think a seat at the head table is available to many, many more of you out there than you've been led to believe. You've been led to believe that head table, that tier 1 table in college football, is accessible for about 3 or 4 big brands out there, and then the door's closed and it's locked and they threw away the key and you're never allowed to access it. But I've always believed that's BS. Because if this sport ever really wanted to tilt itself in favor of someone, they wouldn't choose teams in random small market locations like Clemson, South Carolina, or Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Why would they do that? That makes no sense. What happened is, pay attention to this next part, a long, long time ago, sounds like a Don McLean song, a long, long time ago, people in Tuscaloosa or people in Columbus or South Bend, those people decided we're going to take this sport really seriously and we're going to invest year over year, which became decade over decade, in the infrastructure. We're going to build buildings. We're going to raise money for, at that point, unlimited scholarships, but we're going to have very, very nice facilities. Everything here is going to be done first class. We're going to pay to promote our brand. We're going to really believe in the marketing aspect. And ultimately, we are going to be a driver. We're not going to be a passenger. We're going to be a driver in this whole operation. And they became blue bloods. And then people who were 20 years old, watching them on TV, became 40 years old, and they were sports writers. And then they set narratives that once they were 70 years old, the coming generations would adopt, and voila, you got a blue blood. But my question is, who did it in a cheap way? Who accessed a seat at that table in an underhanded, sort of illegitimate way? I don't see anyone. You don't have to like these teams. I'm not asking you to do that. Quite the opposite. You can hate them all you want to. I'm saying look at what it takes to attain that status, but then I'm going to ask you the follow-up. If you think you're closed off to that, why was LSU able to do what they did in 2019, which was come out of nowhere and win a national championship? Why was Clemson able to do what they did in the 20-teens? They were able to do it because it's possible for a lot of folks to do. Not anyone, because there is a certain baseline of resource you have to have access to. There's a baseline of investment you have to have. But if you have those things, you can do everything they've done at Alabama in College Station, Texas. You can do everything they've done at Alabama in Gainesville, Florida, or in Knoxville, Tennessee, or Clemson, South Carolina. Well, Clemson actually started doing it. They had not done anything along those lines, and then all of a sudden they started doing all those things. What happened? Well, they had a culture that they year over year believed in, they invested in. They had the most out-of-the-box idea, which was to make Dabo Swinney a head coach. No one believed in him. Half the folks up there didn't believe in him, but the right people did. They elevated him. They left him alone. He was not an overnight success, but they kept building, kept building, kept building. They thought they were there a couple of times and got knocked down, but then they finally get a kid out of Gainesville, Georgia, by the name of Deshaun Watson. He's in the news for other reasons now, but back then he was just a dynamite college football player. And Deshaun Watson takes them to a national championship game surrounded by really good talent because they had been recruiting year over year. And they miss out one year, then they beat Bama the next year, and then it's off to the races. And Clemson has a seat at the head table. Now, I wouldn't consider them a blue blood at that point, nor would I right now, just because I think it takes years and years and years. It takes year over year, decade over decade production to achieve that status. But my point is, Clemson showed you. You can get access to that group. You can access that tier. There are extra seats there. You may have to go off in the corner and pick one up and bring it to the table. but you can make your own seat at that table. Here's what I am against. When you think someone's pushing back on it, I'm all for having as many blue bloods as possible in the sport. What I'm against is trying to reverse engineer the process. Trying to say, okay, let's expand a playoff so we can get more blue bloods. Or, even with the 4-team format, let's sit here and argue that you are what your record says you are. So as long as you're undefeated, you deserve a spot in. And this is used at the G5 level a lot of times to try and argue that this undefeated team here belongs in over this one-loss team over there. And then the retort is, well, how are we ever going to get fresh blood if we don't give them a shot? You earn it. You earn it. And then comes the logical follow-up of, well, they went undefeated. How much more can they do to earn it? Well, my answer sometimes is there's nothing they can do, because at the G5 level, you're not playing the same level of ball as they're playing at some of the Power 5 level. So I've always believed in a separate playoff, but that's an entirely different rabbit hole we can go down. My point is, I have argued against Central Florida in the past making the playoff, but I'm a huge fan of what Central Florida is doing. Do you notice what they're doing? They're doing what it takes to get to the head table. They invest year over year. They positioned themselves and shrewdly marketed themselves enough to where, now where are they headed? They're headed to the Big 12 next year. So they achieved Power 5 status, and now until eternity, if Central Florida does run the table, guess what they're going to be in prime position to be? A playoff team, which cashes playoff checks, which goes back into the program if you understand how to manage your money, and then all of a sudden Central Florida is a big player. Central Florida football right now is a better job and a better destination than many Power 5 programs. But to get to that head table, to achieve what we call blue blood status, it doesn't happen overnight. You don't pop a team in a microwave and get a blue blood out 2 minutes later. This is not popcorn. That's not the way that works. But it is attainable. And it's attainable for many more programs out there than you've been led to believe. What you have is you have some underachieving programs out there who horribly mismanage the hiring process, and they can't spell economics, much less have sound financial principle. And instead of taking responsibility, they sell you on the idea that, well, the sport's just tilted against us. No, it's not. Your own administration is tilted against you. But it's a lot easier, as we often say, to look out the window in the front yard and blame them, blame the folks out there, than it is to blame the dude in the mirror who screwed up the budget and mismanaged the last 3 head coaching hires. Yeah, it's a lot easier to do that. So blame the man, just blame the machine. Don't blame the mirror.